I'd bring this meeting to order, please. Carson City Airport Authority, Wednesday, December 20th, 2017, 6 p.m. at the Carson City Community Center Sierra Room. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll?
Chairperson Law.
Here.
Vice Chair Val. Member Barrett.
Here.
Member Golden.
Here.
Member Harris.
Here.
Member Harvey. Member Rogers.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Will you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Thank you. Approval of the minutes of the past meeting of the Airport Authority. Do I have a motion for passage of the minutes as proposed by the Secretary?
Also move.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Member Golden, a second by Member Barrett. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None heard. Motion passes. Item D, modification of the agenda. The chairman reserves the right to modify the agenda in order to most effectively process the agenda items. Items may be taken out of order. Items may be combined for consideration by the authority. Items may be pulled or removed from the agenda at any time. The other thing I would ask is that those present please turn off their cellular devices. At least silence them. Moving on, public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority may speak on agendized and non-agendized matters related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or topic. If your item requires extended discussion, please request the chairman to calendar the matter for future Airport Authority meetings. At this time, do we have any public comment? Hearing none, we will move on to the public hearing. Item F1. For possible action to approve revised and clarified version of a lease awarded to Sierra Skyways LLC, previously approved on October 18, 2017, for the lease parcel located at the corner of taxiways B and C, assessor's parcel number 50911819, Lot E on document 457163, recorded August 28, 2015, revisions to the lease requested by the Carson City. Mr. Takis.
Yes, this is the lease that we awarded as a result of the public notice of offering of land for lease for construction of hangars. We awarded to Sierra Skyway per NRS 844. Every lease that we adopt here at the Airport Authority has to also be approved by the Board of Supervisors. This is required by the statute, but it makes sense because the Board of Supervisors own the underlying land. I sent it over for approval, and before it got very far into the system, I had feedback from the new Chief Financial Officer, Jason, whose last name I can't remember, and also from Supervisor Bonkowski. Jason was asking what I thought were pretty good questions of first impression as to why are we sometimes both city and the airport both called landlord, and in some places in the lease we separately identify the airport and the landlord. And so we went through the lease and made sure that places where we refer to them separately is because they're separate obligations. And then Supervisor Bonkowski had a number of questions that he thought, or a number of clarifications that he thought should be made to the lease. So we pulled it off the Board of Supervisors agenda. I got their input from both of them, drafted the red lines, discussed them also with the tenant, Mr. Giangreco, and the version that you have in front of you tonight is the version with those changes. And very briefly, I'll just tell you what the changes are. The changes identified Carson City as the property owner and Carson City Airport Authority as the operator per NRS 844, and collectively we are the landlord. We clarified when rent is due. We also clarified that if under the lease, the tenant has the ability that if he can't develop all of the property, he can return the unused portion to Carson City. The requirement that we had was that he would have to do a new record of survey map so we could separately parcel it. That would be his expense. And so the language that we included was that upon filing that map, that's when his rent on the portion he didn't want anymore would come back to us. Now, I think it's somewhat unlikely that's going to occur. He has a build-out plan that makes sense. I think there's a market for it. That's my impression, especially after having gone through the hangar use certification. We have empty hangars. We don't have a lot of empty hangars. And I think there's a market for people who want to purchase the condoized hangars. So I don't think it's going to come back to us, but Supervisor Bonkowski, I think quite rightly suggested, let's make it really clear when the rent would end if he doesn't utilize all the land. And then he wanted me to clarify, and under default, if you don't do anything for 30 days, that doesn't automatically mean it's an abandonment. Now, I think that's fairly clear, but it doesn't hurt to clarify that if you're in the construction schedule and you're not doing anything, that shouldn't be a reason for us to say, oh, you've abandoned the project, because there are periods in construction schedules where nothing really goes on that you see in terms of dirt moving, even though there's stuff going on in terms of planning, architecture, utility stuff. And those are the main changes. Oh, and then the other one is we have a provision that says that aircraft stored on leased areas need to be, well, aircraft on the airport, we have Title 19, which says aircraft on the airport should be registered in Carson City. Many of our leases say that as well. They also say that if it's not registered here, it's registered someplace else. The owner of the airplane needs to demonstrate why it's not registered here. Show us the registration. Obviously, if an airplane spends half of its time here and it's half of its time someplace else, that might be a reason to register it someplace else. If the airplane is primarily here, it really should be registered here. In all of our leases, there's a provision saying if your airplane is here for more than 21 consecutive days, we're going to treat it as living here unless you show us something to the contrary. And so we clarified that in the lease. And I think that's about it. Oh, there are a few little typo corrections. You know, there's always some. Oh, and then on utilities, we wanted to make it really clear that trash removal and any other utility charges are the responsibility of the tenant. And that's it. So the changes are very minor. As I say, I went through them and provided a copy to Mr. Giangreco. He's okay with it. He's already signed the revised lease. And so the request that I have for you is to authorize signature of the revised lease and then authorize me to take it back to the Board of Supervisors so we can get going on it.
Thank you, Mr. Takis. Any comment from the members? Any questions from the members? Any public comment on this item? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the revised lease and authorize staff to present it to the Board of Supervisors for their approval. Do I have that motion?
I move.
All right. Do I have a second?
Yep.
All right.
Second it. What's that?
Who seconded?
Michael.
Michael. I have a motion from Mr. Harris and a second from Mr. Golden. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Nay? None heard? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Moving on to item F2 for possible action to approve a revised Airport Capital Improvement Program, ACIP, submitted to the FAA. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Brian Fitzgerald, airport engineer with Atkins. This item was brought up at the last meeting. We had preliminary placed our projects for the next 5 years for FAA funding to what the airport would like to see. And then last Monday, we, the chairman, the interim airport manager and council, and I met with the FAA to discuss those 5-year projects. And at their suggestion and through negotiations, we revised some of the orders that we originally had. Most notably, instead of constructing the perimeter road in 2019, reconstructing the perimeter road in 2019, the perimeter fence was moved up into that time frame. That was mainly due to the wildlife and the security with the wire fence versus chain link fence. Then everything else beyond that was just moved around slightly, maybe 1 year or so, and then everything in around 2023, which is the 5th year out, more or less stayed the same. So this item, for the most part, is at the recommendation of the FAA of what they would like the airport to do and what the airport agreed to at that moment to start planning for in the next 5 years. So this item is essentially just to make sure that you are agreeable with that and then to formally submit it to the FAA for their planning purposes. Any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Golden?
Thanks, Brian. How are you doing this evening?
We're doing great. How about yourself?
Good. Merry Christmas to you.
You too.
Couple quick items. Glad to see the AWAS is on there for next year. And I did make a comment last meeting about the AWAS being inoperative. And I will state to our interim airport manager and to yourself, it appears to be operating again quite functionally, which is necessary. So glad to see that, but I'm glad it's on there also. Question for you about the rehabilitation of the taxiways listed, project number 1. In addition to crack sealing, you say providing an application of GSB-88. Is that a sealant, emulsifier? What is that?
It's a pavement rejuvenator.
Uh-huh.
It's a pavement rejuvenator that is meant to penetrate into the existing pavement and to help it maintain its strength and durability. It's not really, it's a coating and a sealant all mixed together. A little bit of aggregate, minor, it's micro aggregate. But it does really, the runway was done with that, I think it was like 3 years ago as well. So it really helps out the actual panels themselves. And then, of course, crack sealing between each of the panels is going to occur as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions for Mr. Fitzgerald? Any public comment on this item? Hearing none, I would accept a motion that we approve the revised ACIP and authorize staff to file it with the FAA according to their request.
So moved.
Thank you. Okay, we have, gotta turn my paper over. We have a motion from Mr. Rogers and a second from Mr. Barrett. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None heard. Motion carried. Okay, item F3 for possible action, discussion to approve a schedule for gate card renewal fees. Mr. Zatilla.
Hi, this is just an item to try and help streamline some of the things that the manager has to take care of at the airport. The gate card renewal system is pretty random the way it is now. It happens when people decide to come in and pay for their cards. Sometimes they're a little late, sometimes they're 2 years late. And so we have very little control over it, and it's hard to take any action when somebody's card has expired for a month or 2 months or something. We'd like to take them out of the system, but it takes a lot of man hours to do that. So what I'm proposing is that we go to a schedule where everybody's card is renewed at the same time every year instead of just by their anniversary date of their card, of the purchase of their card. It'll help to a point. I mean, it won't be 100%, but it will cut down a lot of the time that goes into it, so that we can kind of get through it in a 1 month period, and hopefully it'll taper off. And part of the idea too is that we have to have a system of prorating the fees to make it work with this. And that's, all this is up for discussion, but, and the proposal is that we do it on July 1st would be the due date for them at the beginning of our fiscal year. And hopefully then throughout the rest of the year, it would be a lot smaller operation taking care of the cards that get sold during the year. So if there's any questions or discussion, let me
One
have
of the
it.
things I would like is for you to explain, having gone back through previous meetings and the amounts that were set historically that haven't been followed up on.
It was kind of been all over the place. It used to be, I think, when the first time I showed up, my first card was $10, and that was it. There was no renewals, no nothing. And then later on, it went to $25 for the card and still no renewal fees. And then we added renewal fees of $10 a year. I think that was 4 years ago. And somewhere in there, it got kind of lost as far as what the charge would be if somebody lost a card and wanted a replacement one. It was kind of, there was no set price for that. And I don't remember if that ever got resolved, but it makes a lot of sense to have, if it's $25 for a new card, if you lose your card and you want a new card, it's $25. It's pretty simple and straightforward. So that's kind of the situation as I know it.
And when the $10 renewal was imposed, that was in order strictly to be put into the gate fund, right?
Yes.
All of those fees then at that point in time were directed to the gate and fence fund.
It's specified just for the gates. I thought it might have been for the fences as well, but but it's not.
Okay.
It's strictly for the gates and the gate operators and the card readers and that whole system.
Okay. Any discussion on this item? Member Golden?
Thanks, Dirk. Merry Christmas to you, too.
Merry Christmas.
Couple of comments as a gate card holder at multiple airports, and this is as much for yourself and the public as it is for my counterparts here on the Airport Authority. First and foremost, I concur we should have a fixed date. There should not be any proration or prorated fees. Fixed date. Everybody goes on the date. And July 1st sounds pretty reasonable to me since it's the beginning of the fiscal year. Sounds perfect. It shouldn't be difficult, though, to disable a gate card. It shouldn't be anything that takes more than a simple data entry on the computer system. My gate card has been activated. My gate cards have gone bad at this airport, and I've had to go into the management office and had a new one issued to me that had to be reactivated, basically. It shouldn't take a whole lot of time to deactivate a gate card for someone who isn't paying, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Let me continue, though. It is highly unusual, and I'm just pointing this out for my counterparts here. It is highly unusual for an airport to charge its tenants for gate cards, especially on an annualized basis. I don't pay for my gate cards at any airports where we are the tenant, okay? If I have a hangar, if I have a business, I don't pay for the gate card. Now, let me give you an example of that. At Lake Tahoe Airport, we are the FBO. I have a gate card. My manager has a gate card. We have a gate card in the office to let patrons come and go onto the airfield. However, let's say a limousine driver wants to access, or a cab company wants access to the ramp. Because they're not a tenant, they have to pay. And they have to pay an annual fee. But this is pretty universal. It's highly unusual for the tenants to pay for a gate card. That doesn't mean that when there's a hangar with an aircraft, and we'll just say it's a rental aircraft, and the students want gate cards, that doesn't mean the students shouldn't pay. But whoever the tenant is of that aircraft, again, highly unusual. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I know the system paying for the gate and all that, it's really, really out of the norm, because it's kind of sticking it to the tenants who are already paying rent on the airport. Just an FYI. I don't know where this policy came from. I'm just saying, it is not the norm. So those are my comments, and I certainly support a July 1st date and no prorata fees. You just pay, if there's going to be a fee, you just pay the fee, and that's that.
I would ask you, Member Golden, in a situation where you have a tenant, a lessee, who has a number of hangars for rent, and say I rent from one of those, which I do. I'm not really, I'm a tenant on the airport, I pay my rent, but I pay it to that one particular lessor. Are you suggesting that she would not pay for the gate card key, but that I would or would not?
I'll put it to you in simple terms. You have a hangar on the airport, a hangar gets a gate card. That's it. Okay? I have a hangar in Truckee. They actually are very kind. I have 2 gate cards. one. I guess they gave everyone 2. You got 2 cars. You leave 1 in each car. I don't know what they were thinking, but there's no annual fee. You just get your gate card. Okay? I have gate access to my tie-down at San Carlos Airport. There's no fee for that. Okay? I have a tie-down. I'm a tenant. Now, let's take another example. You have someone who does work on the airport, on airplanes, a mechanic, for example, who's not a tenant, but does work on the airport. They want a gate card, they gotta pay. It's pretty simple. How about an electrician who's coming and going doing work on the airport? They want a gate card, they have to pay. A delivery service, they want a gate card, they have to pay. And I don't know what, I'll defer to Steve maybe. I don't know what other airports you've been to as a tenant, but I've just never heard of paying for a gate card when you're a tenant and then paying an annual fee on top of it at a GA airport.
Let me give you a little bit of historical background. First of all, I know Dirk is chomping at the bit to explain to you, each gate card has to be programmed physically at each gate. And so it's not as easy as just going in and deactivating or activating a card. It's one of the systems we got to get rid of, and we got to put a more sensible system like the one that Truckee just put in. And Truckee, by the way, just lowered their gates a few months ago. So they've got gate cards, and they give each tenant 2 gate cards. They don't charge for those cards. But for the longest time, you could drive right on the airport. Their gates were open anyway, so it's like you didn't really need one. But there are other airports that have charged. We've had this discussion before with a prior set of airport authority members, and you certainly can change the policy. That's your prerogative. The discussion before was we have costs associated with the gates. The people who utilize the gates are the people, that are getting the benefit of the gates working and bringing them out. And we used to have a lot more problems when the gates were not cantilevered gates, when they were on rollers. Every winter you get ice and stuff on there, or rocks in the summer or something, and the gates would jam. Less so now, but we still have failures. And the discussion was we should really have the people who are using the gate pay for the maintenance on the gate. And that's how it arose. Member Morris White was adamant that the collection of those fees should be sequestered just for use on the gates, and so that's the process that we used. Like I said, you can change your mind if you want to, and I have seen it in some other airports, but I would agree with you, in most airports, it's somehow rolled into the rent. But most airports are not like the Carson City Airport. We are self-sustaining. We don't get tax revenues, other than the personal property tax on the airplanes and the real property tax on the hangar improvements. We're not like Minden or Truckee or any of those airports who a substantial portion of their budget comes from the city's general fund. And so that's kind of what drove part of the discussion before of, should we charge a gate fee, what should it be? And should there be a renewal fee because there's ongoing maintenance? The other issue that Member White brought up is we got to replace these gates at some time. We should be building up a reserve to do that. And of course, you can probably say that for everything we do on the airport. We should be building up a reserve so we can take care of things. But the gates were a sensitive spot, and so Morris White pushed pretty hard on that. That's how we got here. I'm not telling you it's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that's how we got here, and it's your prerogative to change it. But I know Dirk's chomping at the bit over there to respond to other things you've said, so I'll shut up now.
One of the things that I would mention is when I was sitting in Dirk's seat for a month, we have a number of tenants who have multiple cards that they have come over and gotten for people who have access to their particular hangars. And in that instance, even if we chose to go back to a situation where we gave out 1 or 2 cards for a tenant, we would still have a significant number of people who would renew in July and who now send people over one at a time, sometimes come with them, sometimes not, to get new cards for something that they're doing there at their hangar. So this is what has been causing most of the grief for the manager or for Gary to go around and have to rekey new cards and that sort of thing. So that's why this is being brought up. And we thought if we put the renewal date for the already established fee at July 1 and carried it forward, that we would eliminate a lot of that extra work that's being done currently. And that way, once a year, we have to have a headache, and the rest of the year would be pretty good.
And let me just state, I'm 100% for that. I just wanted to put the comment out there about the fees for the gate card. And I'm not suggesting we have that discussion this evening. I'm just saying. And as you're saying, Linda, when there's a hangar with multiple users, those users should be paying for gate access. I have no issue with that. So,
Can I just add one other thing? I totally support, though, your suggestion, Mr. Golden, that there be no proration. I think that just adds a whole nother level. We're trying to simplify things. And as a user, I like this idea of having them all renew on July 1st, because at one point I had 3 cards in my office for our hangar, and they were all obtained at different times, and so I was constantly had a card that didn't work because I didn't remember to renew it, and asking the airport manager to do that, and I'm just one person with 3 cards, asking that to do it for the other 218 hangars on the airport, it gets unwieldy. So I think from a user standpoint, I think that's a good idea too. As a user, I'd support that too. And I think proration's kind of silly. We're talking really small amount of money.
I think one of the things that we could do is, except for new cards and replacement cards between now and July 1st, anybody that's in arrears that would come forward to pay their dues, we would accept them. But everybody would be due in July of this year, and so there'd be kind of a grace period between now and then, because we do have sufficient funds in our gate account to carry us certainly for a short period of time. And then that way we would be working on an anniversary date alone.
that's mighty generous. That's 6 months.
I understand that. But we have a number of people that have January, March, July, September, and as many as 6 or 7 different renewal dates within their particular group. So we might, I don't know if you'd want to set a time or just say that if somebody came in to pay their gate, you'd accept it and move forward on July 1st. I don't know how we want to approach that. That's something I'd throw out for discussion because, 6 months is a long time, but.
Yeah,
But
it's probably the smart thing to do.
Yeah, it simplifies some of this, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, one of the things that I want to bring up, and you guys can make whatever decision you like about this prorating thing, just to play devil's advocate, if I came in June and bought a new card, and 3 weeks later you said, oh, well, you got to pay another $10 now, I wouldn't be real thrilled about that.
That's not what Linda's suggesting.
And, this is why the prorating thing comes up. What if I bought it in March? Then 3 months later, I got to pay another year. It rubs people the wrong way. And from the guy who sits in that chair, you get enough grief already without somebody coming in and raising hell with you over $2. It's tough. How do we deal with that? So feel free to answer that, because I'm only going to be there for a little while, and then somebody else will have that headache.
Member Golden.
Got a question for you, Dirk, because I have so many gate cards, I don't know which end is up. What's the gate card fee?
$10 a year.
I am vehemently opposed to anyone asking us to prorate that fee.
I don't think it's the $10 we're looking to prorate, is it?
Yes, because if you buy a new, okay, let me explain how the system is set up now. A new card is $25, okay? Part of that $25 is that card is supposed to be good for a year until the next year, when you pay another $10 each year after that. Okay? If you lose your card, it's $25. If your card gets shut off because you didn't pay it, and we have to go around and reprogram it, that's $25. If you pay on time, and I wanted to have a 1 month grace period, so by the end of July, you have to pay for your card, and then after July, if you haven't paid, it gets cut off. So take it from there. Tell me what you want me to do.
Member Harris.
I have to say I've never heard of prorating a $10 fee, so I won't say I'm vehemently opposed to it, but I'm opposed to it.
The reason I'm vehemently opposed to it is I have to deal with these people too on a regular basis, and it's one of those things where they will ask you to prorate it to the day sometimes. And it's not just the concept of it, it's the time it takes for staff to deal with that issue. That's where I'm coming from more than anything. It's a management intensive matter. They can either pay that $10 or not.
I was going to suggest prorating it by quarters, because doing it by the month, it's like 85 cents or something. I mean, that's getting ridiculous. But anyhow, I don't object to any way you want to do that. Another thing I wanted to mention too is under the rules, what was approved for the gate cards as to who could have the gate cards, employees of an FBO are not eligible to have a gate card. They can have a gate card, but they have to get it from the FBO, from that person. The cards are signed out to the FBO owner, and he can issue them, because I don't think that the airport authority wants to be responsible for what a employee does who is no longer working at the airport. It opens up a liability issue, and that's why we didn't want to do that. So just wanted to bring that out.
Generally speaking, all the gate cards should be under a lessee's name.
Well, it's
The
not
F-
always that
the-
simple.
I know, the FBO, well, I have two, and I rent a hangar from one of the hangar groups, okay?
Yeah.
From Comstock.
No,
so-
if you have an airplane that's based on the airport, you're allowed to buy a gate card. If you have a hangar, if you lease a hangar, own a hangar, whatever, you can have a gate card. FBOs can all have a gate card. One of the things Mike mentioned, if somebody, a mechanic wants to come out there and work on the airport, he cannot get a gate card from me. He will have to get it from the person he's working for, and let them be responsible for that person. Because, if some employee gets disgruntled and takes off, now he's got access to the airport and everybody's airplanes, and I don't think we should be responsible for that, so.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? From the authority members? Mr. Takis, do you have any comment on that?
Well, I was just looking to see if it was in Title 19, but my only comment would be, you don't want people to get mad at you, I understand that, but the explanation when they first get their gate card should be, here's what happens. We're charging you $25. When July 1st comes, you're going to have to pay another $10. You tell them up front. If to them, it's worth waiting till July 1st to pay you the $25 to get the card, they can make that judgment decision. I think most people are going to say, fine, give me the card, see you on July 1st with $10. But I think that's the solution for how you keep people from getting mad at you when they see you charge them. The other thing, I guess, the question is, do you send out bills for the gate cards?
No.
Okay, so.
It would be virtually impossible.
Okay, so if it's impossible to do that, then, so how do you know when somebody's due? I mean,
This is part of the problem.
Okay.
We almost don't unless I sit down there and start reading through that list for dates that are out. You know, we have a database with
Okay.
all of the card holders. And whenever they renew their card, all we do is change the year on there from their anniversary date.
okay,
But the problem is, we have people that'll have 4, 5, 10 cards, and they come in and, well, I want to renew this card, but not the other 5. And it's ridiculous.
Right.
It's impossible.
my recommendation to the authority would be, if you're going to have a July 1st renewal date, which I think makes enormous sense, you should also include that the card will not be deactivated until August 1st or something. You have to create some kind of time period so that when a person discovers their card doesn't work anymore, they have an opportunity to come in and get it renewed. And actually, now that I think about it, that's not going to work either. Because if you leave it active till August 1st, then the day they're going to discover that is August 1st. There needs to be some kind of education campaign that goes with this so that people know. And maybe you just put it on the gates. Gate cards renewed on July 1st. If renewal's not paid, your gate card won't work, or something like that.
We can put it on the gates as well as post it on the website, and also, put a pack of flyers out, and anybody that comes into the office, give them one, along with what the fees are, because when I started over there after Tim took off, we were in a situation where all I had in the drawer were a bunch of blue stickies with a bunch of money. And so I made up a log and all of that stuff, and he, inherited that. But I think handing out, when a person gets a new card, they should be given the rules and what it is and when it's going to renew and all that. And when somebody gets, a new card or a replacement card, make sure you give them another piece of paper that gives the rules.
I think we need to address this issue with the dates first. But we have a bigger problem at hand from what you're telling us, Dirk.
Which one is that?
We need to know who every card is issued to and how to reach them. Okay? This is a security issue. If you can't reach these people and you don't know who they're issued to or how to reach out to them, we have a security issue, okay? And I don't fault you for it, Dirk.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, this airport, if there is not a database with a mailing list of every single gate card issued, and no one's been keeping track of that, well, but what I'm hearing is there's no way to reach out to these people.
Well, there is. When we issue a card, they have to fill out a form that has their phone number and address and email address and all that stuff. So we have a pretty good database of that stuff. The time involved to contact all those people and try and bill them and stuff is
Okay, hold on
enormous.
a second. Dirk,
Yeah.
how many gate cards are issued?
Approximately right now around 800.
Yeah.
And we,
800
yes,
cards?
and we have a capacity for 1,000. That's what the card readers want.
And how many aircraft are based on the airport?
270.
Yeah, I was going to say about 300.
Well,
And there's
we
eight-
have tenants with as many as 30 cards.
Okay. This is a problem I think that needs to be addressed in another meeting about, that is highly unusual.
That could be a separate issue, but I would
It's a
like to get
separate
the main issue resolved as far as the date, and that would be nice to get solved, because that alone will save a lot of
Okay, but you
headaches.
have email addresses for every card holder.
I doubt if they're for every card, but a lot of them.
Okay.
And, and there may be cards that people have moved out of the area and haven't used them, and they're 2 years out of date and haven't been taken off the system. And no, it's not my fault. I'm not taking credit for that one. But right now, we're just on the verge of going through and purging the system of all of the expired old cards. Within the next week, we should have that finished.
Okay.
But it was not done on a regular basis, so.
Further comments?
That's the beauty of having a single date for renewal, right? It'll give us a wonderful tickle to do our database management.
Any other comments from the members of the authority? Mr. Harris?
Derek, I just want to say that if this is a project where just two more hands would help get you through this, I'm happy to come out and, I've got a little time on my hands. So I'm happy to come out and sit down in front of a computer, if we get one that works, and help you get through that database, do whatever, or as far as that goes, somebody shows me how to shut off cards at various gates, I can do that too. I'm happy to help you get up to date on this, because it is a security issue.
Yeah, I agree, and it wouldn't hurt. I think the main thing that would be nice is if we had some help notifying people by email that we have email addresses for, because there are people who are not local people. They're here part-time, and sometimes, most of the time, they're somewhere else, but they still have a card and have a need for it. And just posting a thing at the gate isn't going to solve the problem for them. So it would be nice if we could at least make a one-time effort of, emailing everybody.
Well, I'm known for my low-level administrative skills, so I can help you there.
Any further comments from the authority members? Any public comment? Mr. Graber?
Hi, Brad Graber. Merry Christmas. It's only $10, and look at how much time you had to spend on it, $10. But I will tell you, this is a burr under the saddle of a lot of people on this airport. The gates at this airport, our airport, are really a challenge. Over 3 months ago, I took my card in because it wouldn't work on the main gate after I go over and pick up my mail. It still doesn't work. Our card system is really in trouble. I am a tenant because I lease land. But more importantly, I'm an owner of a building that helped to capitalize this airport. And so I concur with you, Michael Golden, that I don't think I should be charged for one card. If I need two, I'll pay $25. But I don't think you should charge an owner for a card. 800 cards, you're short. You're short by a lot. I'll bet you there's 2,000 cards out there from the start till now. Of course, most of them are not active. When I started, it was $10, and you promised me, the airport promised me that I would get my money back when I turned it in, or when my estate turned it in, all right? Of course, that didn't happen, and the price went up to $25. And really, what does it cost to buy the card? I'm not really sure of that. Pardon me? $3.50, so $25 is okay. If we did sell 2,000 cards over time, we made $50,000. at $25 apiece. Well, $50,000 in the till to handle the gates would do that for at least 1 year, even considering the speed of some of the maintenance that goes on around here. You know, we would cover ourselves. So what I'm suggesting to you is to know that the aura that's caused at our airport about cards is really negative. We do not need to charge $10 a year for every card. Pay the 25 and let it go. Really. Last year you collected $4,700 for cards. In the total scope of things, that's really nothing. You know, you got way more than $4,700 in bad feelings from your owners, say nothing of your tenants. So I think you ought to consider not charging your owners if they buy a card. If they've already paid for them, done deal. But I don't think you ought to be charging $10 for every card. I have several cards, way more than Linda Law does, because I've got a few hangers, and people come to me and they need to get in, and they say, yo, Graber, you know, you charged me too much for your hanger, give me a card. So I give them a card. Right? And then they come back to me and say it doesn't work, and I say, well, here's $10, go take care of it. The point I make is we're causing a lot of hard feelings with the way we're running our gate card system. So in summary, I want to suggest to you that you sell the cards for $25, done deal. Forget the $10 a year. Just absolutely forget it. Thanks for listening, and if there's questions, I'd like to. A lot of you folks, I mean, you're not on the airport. You don't hear this. I'm there every day. It's a conversation. It's a conversation. You know, I'm right across from the fuel island. I got a Christmas card this year from somebody from Ohio because I gave them a car to go to Sonic, and then they ended up staying all night. I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. These nice people sent me a card, a Christmas card.
That's one more than I got, Brad.
Well, it's more than you deserved, I guess.
Excuse me, can I just interrupt for just a second?
Turnabout's fair play, Michael.
Excuse me, Mr. Graber.
hold on.
Just 1 second. You're talking about whether they should or shouldn't charge.
That's right.
We're not agendized for that. They can't make a decision on that, and so that's not relevant to discussion. The only discussion that's here is the schedule for renewal.
Great. Don't have a schedule.
And so, yeah. I mean, if you want to raise that other issue and the authority wants to bring it up, that would have to be noticed on a separate agenda. Otherwise, we're outside the scope.
You can handle it any way you want. I'm just saying there's a bad aura at our airport over $10 a year.
Thank you, Mr. Graber.
I want to add a comment, and forgive me, I have to admit that I was against the $10 fee at the time too. So, and I'm supposed to be neutral here, but I have to say that. One of the reasons was not monetary for doing that, because we had so many cards issued that we got to a point where that system was full. We had, somebody would come in and say, I'm sorry, I can't give you a card. Our system is full. And if we don't know what cards are not used anymore, people move and employees left, and this became a huge issue that, we couldn't just keep handing out more and more and more cards, because who are we going to say no to? And so there had to be some system where you could control that inventory, and like I said, and the 800 cards, that's active cards. That's not the ones that have been handed out over a period of time. I mean, there's probably been, a couple thousand cards handed out over the years, so.
Member Golden.
It's a bigger issue, way bigger issue, than just picking a date for renewal. The more I hear from you, Dirk, the more I see this is a major problem that needs to be addressed. I'm going to suggest that this airport authority table this matter to a later date when we can address all the facets, including fees, if any, and how to clean this system up. Because that's my biggest concern here, is cleaning this up and getting a functional system. That's my biggest concern. With 800 outstanding cards, that needs to be reined in and controlled, and selecting a date no matter what isn't going to solve this problem. We're just kicking a can down the road, putting a date out there. And Mr. Takis is correct. The only thing, with all due respect, Brad, that's on the agenda is the renewal date here. We really can't discuss fees, and that's why I'm suggesting we table this matter to another time, because there's a lot of moving parts in this.
Personally, I don't see that necessary, because this is a separate issue. And fixing the date problem is a start on solving the rest of the problem. And next month, we can talk about the fees. I don't care if the fee's $1, you know? If it's just, it gives us a system of control where we know that, you know, these cards have expired. If somebody doesn't check in with us, maybe it's a zero fee and they just have to report in every year, you know, and renew their card in writing. You know, I really don't care, and that's something you could put on next month's agenda. I'd be glad to help with that. But I still think the date thing could get resolved easily. And like you say, if you don't want to prorate it, that's fine too. No problem.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to obey this item, and I would entertain a motion to set a date. So whoever wants to make the motion, you're welcome to it. Hearing no responses, I think we will table this until next month.
Well, what are we tabling till next month? If we're tabling till next month just this, then we're in the same situation a month from now.
It would be my intention to table this item and add to it whatever is necessary to work on the larger problem. And that language will be determined. I may ask Mr. Golden to work with Dirk to get to that point, but at this point, I think we would probably, it wouldn't hurt us to consider the broader perspective and the broader problem at a single meeting.
That's fine.
Both issues.
Yeah, if you add that, because it doesn't matter if you're going to make it at the July 1st date if we do it in December or if we do it in January.
True. Okay, I would entertain a motion to, do I need to, Mr. Takis, do I need to have a motion to table this item?
No, as chairman, you can
Thank you.
can suspend it till next meeting.
So done. Moving on to the next item, item F4 for possible action, discussion to approve the installation of a green Learn to Fly Here sign near the entrance to the airport. This will be obeyed because Mr. Vowell is in an emergency room in Utah.
I'm going to use the restroom.
Okay.
Keep going.
We would have a 5-minute recess. We'll be back here in 5 minutes. I'd like to go back to item F4 briefly. I've changed my mind about considering it. Basically, what we were looking for was Mr. Val was supposed to go to the city, make sure that present his drawing of his sign, his graphics for his sign, make sure the city was okay with it and so forth, rather than have to move this to another agenda further down the line. I would entertain a motion that the chairman and the interim manager be allowed to receive that information from Mr. Val, and if it is in accordance with the city terms for signage and so forth, and it's consistent with what's on our main sign out front, that we go forward with it and allow us to make that decision rather than bringing it back to the authority.
Also move.
Second.
Okay, I have an original motion by Member Golden and a second by Member Harris. Any discussion on the motion? Any public comment on the motion? All in favor of the item? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None heard. Motion passes. Moving on to item F5 for possible action, discussion to approve a schedule of tie-down fees for authority-managed tie-downs. Mr. Zatilla, if you'd like to start.
I really don't want to start. I would rather somebody else did. I looked at the information that we got from Mr. Golden and got so many different possibilities. I almost don't know where to start. Originally we were charging $5 a night for overnight and for singles, small planes. Beyond that, I don't know what was charged earlier on. Recently, we were charging $10 and $20 for twins and larger aircraft, and $40 if they parked on the circles over by the terminal building. These things were all arbitrary decisions by the manager. There was nothing ever approved that I'm aware of. And I tried to look back through the old minutes, and I didn't find anything one way or the other about those fees. So that's kind of where we're at now. There's nothing official, and it's up for some discussion.
And do you have an inventory on how many tie-down spaces the airport is responsible for?
Oh, I wish you hadn't asked me that. I think we have 24. I think that's the correct number, but it's within one or two of that.
Member Golden?
Do you have a proposed fee schedule you want the airport authority to consider?
Well, I like the idea of $10 for singles and $20 for light twins. Beyond that for larger, and the $40 for the circles. Mostly we kind of want to discourage people parking overnight on the circles because those are really meant for transient. Like CareFlight uses those a lot. So that's about all I have on my plate right now.
Any other input from members of the authority? Mr. Rogers?
Do we have any market analysis? Do we know what the other airports, general aviation airports in the region, charge for similar services? I mean, it seems like it shouldn't have to be an arbitrary, pick a number out. We ought to be able to identify what the going rate is
anywhere
and
from
charge.
nothing to a lot.
Oh.
It's all over the place.
Member Golden?
I do a lot of research on this on a regular basis, being that we own a number of FBOs. And for a point of clarification, Mr. Rogers, you were not here for the last meeting, as I recall. but I do want to state for my other counterparts and for the public that I did call the airport in Minden and did verify that they do charge for overnight parking, and it is $8 for a piston single, $20 for a twin, and up from there. So there's no free ride over there. The lowest that I've seen it is our operation out in Elko, and that's only because the city council hasn't taken up the fees. They're the ones who establish the fees for the airport. And their fees are pretty significant, except when you're in the lower end, like us lowly pilots, Linda. Piston singles are like $5 or $6 a night, but there's no monthly rates there. So you're paying every single night you're on the ramp.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting.
Kind of expensive.
Yeah, it can get kind of expensive. That said, really, the $10 number for a single is pretty universal. Like I said, Minden is $8. My guess is if I wanted to go visit a friend of mine over in Reno and park over at Atlantic, I'd be paying a lot more than $10 a night to park on their ramp. I think that $10 is a reasonable, very reasonable rate for piston single, $20 for a twin, $40 for a turboprop, and up from there. Remember too, you have insurance and you have snow removal around those aircraft. You have tie-down mechanisms, be them chains or ropes that you have to maintain. You have to provide chocks for the larger aircraft. So there's a lot going into it here, more than just parking on the pavement. And you'd be hard-pressed to park your Winnebago at a KOA for $20 a night. So I think proposing 10, 20, and 40 for starters is a good place to start.
Another issue along with this that I forgot to mention, I would like to establish monthly fees too, because we do get monthly people as well.
Any guidance on what those monthly fees would be?
The only thing I know is in the past, and it was $40 a month, and this was based on a couple of the FBOs that had tie downs were charging that much, and that's what we were charging. And another part of this discussion is we want to try not to undercut the FBOs that have tie downs too. So it wouldn't be right of us to give people a free ride and let them avoid paying the other FBOs as well.
Do you happen to know what the monthly fee that's being paid for Sterling Air or Weaver or Mr. Golden's facility is?
I rented from Sterling, but it's been several years ago, and it was $40 a month. I don't know if he's changed since then. And Shade Tree was charging $30, and
Up until August?
yeah. And I think you were charging $40 a month also. That's what I was being charged, but that's been about 2 or 3 years ago.
Member Golden, do you have any information on that?
I do. Do I need to recuse myself from the conversation, though?
Well, no. No, you can provide
Just
information. Yeah.
Okay. We charge, I want to say, don't hold me to this, it's not exceeding this. I think we charge $60 a month. I know we charge $60 a month at Lake Tahoe Airport. I know that for a fact. I think we charge $60, maybe it's $50. We give tenants a break if they pay up front for a year. They can pay 11 months for a year. So if it's $50, and again, I don't know the don't hold me to this. I don't know for sure what it is. If it's not 50, it needs to be 50. But let's just say it's 50. They can pay $550 and tie down for the whole year. And we do have tenants who do that. They like that idea. Something else, and again, this goes back to that persnickety gate card discussion. We established policy, we do not prorate. So I don't care how many days they're on the ramp, they can be on the ramp 18 out of 30 days, they pay the monthly rent, period. No questions asked. And when they pay monthly, they have to have a credit card on file so that we don't get involved in
Anything further, Mr. Zatilla?
I think just from the discussion that I've heard, I think that what I would recommend is that $10 for singles, 20 for twins, 40 for turbos. Do we still go with 40 for the circles? And 50 a month for tie down for monthly? And we have to come up with something for larger aircraft for monthly fees, but I don't think it's going to happen much. Because for the most part, the larger aircraft are going to have hangars. So they're not going to really do monthly, I don't think. So I think we could just go with the 50 a month for monthly fees for singles and maybe light twins, because they take up the same space pretty much.
Any other comments or questions of Mr. Zatilla? Do I have an appetite for a motion?
I'll make a motion if you so entertain.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the rates as stated, $10 for a single, 20 for a light twin, 40 for a turbo, 40 for the circles, $50 a month for light twins and singles, for tie downs. And then do we need to include the open area amount that we set for the area over in the dirt? Do we need to do
We
that?
already
did
set that
right?
at $120 a month.
Okay. So that's taken care of. So with the monthly fee of 50 and the others as stated, I would entertain that motion.
Could I revise it?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
You can restate it if you'd like.
I would like to restate it.
Do it.
I would revise it as follows. Nightly rates, I'd move that we establish nightly tie-down rates. Everyone's going to want to take notes on this. $10 piston singles, 20 for piston twins, $40 a night for turboprops, and we'll go $60 a night for light jets. I don't think we're going to have anything else in nightly.
Right.
Now, for monthly, and this is under the same motion, so take some notes here. I would suggest we go $55 a month piston singles, $75 a month twins, and under the turboprops, boy oh howdy, and jets, I don't know where I'd go with that. I think you gotta, I think they're gonna be in a hangar. I think you gotta just leave it at that.
I don't think we've ever had monthlies of that nature, ever.
So if you want me to restate that motion, Chairman?
The only thing
Chairwoman?
I didn't hear you say there was the $40 circle.
That was under the turboprop
Okay.
and light jet, presuming they're going to park in the circle. So I would move that, I would move that the airport establish the following fees. For nightly parking, $10 for piston twins, $20 for
Piston
piston...
singles. $10.
$10 piston singles, thank you.
That's okay.
$20 for piston twins, $40 for turboprops and light jets, monthly rates of $55. Go ahead, Dirk.
You said 60.
60 for light jets.
My apology. $60 for light jets. I didn't write it down is the problem. $55 monthly piston single, $75 monthly piston twin.
Okay, do I have a second on the motion?
I second it.
Okay, I have a motion from Member Golden and a second from Member Harris. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I have a question. I just am curious because I don't know what others do, but one night, 10, 20, but monthly 55, 75? Should it not be a little higher for monthly or not?
I think traditionally, most airports use about a 5-night, same as the monthly rate.
Okay.
They're trying to encourage transient-type usage, so that's generally what I've run into historically.
I'd like to amend this,
Just asking.
because I want to make sure there's no confusion here.
Member Golden.
I'd like to amend my motion. I would so move that we establish a fee schedule for parking of aircraft on hard surface areas managed by the airport along the following lines. $10 for a piston single per night, $20 for a piston twin per night, $40 for turboprops per night, $60 for jets per night, $55 monthly fee for piston singles, $75 monthly fee for piston twins with no prorations.
I second.
Any public comment on this motion? All in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, moving on to item F6 for possible action. Discussion and approval of job description for airport manager, review of draft employment agreement, plan for filling the airport manager vacancy, publishing or posting of a job availability. Mr. Harris.
The job description was included on the website, so it's out there and available. Just to talk a little bit about process, there was sort of a skeletal version put together early on by Larry. Then there were comments made by various, various members of the authority and others. I then took that information and kind of consolidated it, put it in what I thought was the proper order, and sent it to the subcommittee for comment. At that point, that was Linda, Larry, and I. And they made some small adjustments, and then we sent it out to the general population. I think probably the most interesting part of this whole discussion will be regarding the little tagline we had at the bottom that said that the compensation would range between $60K and $90K. And I'm happy to go through the thinking process, how we got to those numbers. There's a few things I want to then do just in terms of the what those ranges mean and what they mean in terms of the qualifications of the applicants. The first point I want to make is that there will be a tendency whenever somebody sees a range of pay to immediately think about the top as the cost of that. And that is not the case at all. That very, very top rate is there for that incredible candidate that comes in off the street. And that is basically saying that's the most we can pay for an incredible candidate. And what I've proposed is that most amount is $90,000 a year. There is a number there, the $60,000, and what $60,000 means is that if you read that job description and they have the 5 years of experience, the 4 years of college, the experience as individual pieces of experience as we've laid out there, if they have that, that's considered a minimum qualification, and that would mean that we'd expect them to start at the $60,000. The midpoint of that is $75,000, and that is really the number that I'd like people to think about when they think about this position, that midpoint. And what that midpoint would look like, you know, the kind of candidate would be somebody above those minimum qualifications. Instead of 5 years, maybe 10. And they might also have that pilot's license we'd like to have. They also might have a Navy background or an Air Force background, or a very strong airport background. But it is not those minimum qualifications that you'd be looking at for the $75,000. It would be above that. The other point I want to make, just addressing a complaint, if you will, that came in a letter that was shared on the website. There was discussion about whether this needed to be a position with 4 years of college. And the point I want to make is that's based on the benchmarking. When you go out and you look at the small airport managers, it plainly says in the job descriptions that are used that it is normal for them to have a 4-year degree. Okay, so it is not. I don't see that as at all arbitrary. There's also something in the job description that says, or basically an alternative. If you have what we consider equivalent experience to fill in for that education, then the 4 years isn't necessary. Maybe it's going to be 2, or maybe it's going to be armed forces experience, or it's going to be something else. But those things are possible, and so we're not boxed in to say they absolutely have to have that 4-year degree. The other thing I want to do is to make clear to folks what $75,000 buys in today's world. I went into the site called Transparency Nevada, and I looked at just Carson City jobs, City of Carson City jobs, to see what other positions are earning around $75,000. Now, I am only going to mention positions where I believe there are multiple incumbents, so I'm not saying Joe makes this much money. I don't think that's fair. But I am going to mention some of these multiple positions, and they end up to be right around $75,000, okay? So this is another kind of benchmarking to look at it from the standpoint of what in a Carson City government position, what would the same amount of money buy you, okay? And this is just a matter of comfort for folks. But here are examples. That's what a firefighter earns. That is what a fiscal analyst earns. A driver that's also qualified on heavy equipment earns that with the city. A deputy sheriff, a juvenile probation officer, A foreman in the water or in the sewer departments would earn that. A nurse working for the city would earn that. A judicial assistant, an accounting manager, a wastewater plant mechanic, and a senior clerk. So that gives you an idea of the amount of talent you can buy with $75,000. So I don't think it's what I'm suggesting as a midpoint is exorbitant. I think I'm comfortable with that number. I will talk a little bit about how I arrived at that midpoint. And I'm basing a lot of this on Larry's work. But he based some of this on a service that he has available to him called PayScale. He looked at this. We looked at the data, or he looked at the data, and we saw some at the bottom that was pretty much skewed. We thought, for example, it said the 10th percentile in smaller port managers were making $39,000, and we thought, there has to be something wrong with this data. All right, they might be a airport manager, but they are not the airport manager, is more or less the way I came away with that. So we said, the mean there is probably low. We moved it up a bit, but the mean is, the 70th percentile is 65,500. All right. So we used the 70th percentile instead of the 50th, so we didn't go right to the mean, we went above it, to take care of that problem with there being a number of what I think were bad matches matched at the bottom of the range. And that number is adjusted for cost of living of our region. It does not reflect any airport development or marketing or any of that responsibility. It's purely a management of airport, not of growth for that position. We also, he also looked at Indeed, and an experienced airport managers at about about 74,000. Okay, in that database. They reported numbers as low as 34,000. So again, I looked at that and I said, I think we've got some mismatches at the bottom. We didn't have that kind of weird skew at the top. And there, again, it does not include any airport development responsibilities. We also looked around at some area airport managers, what we could get from public records. City of Kelso, 67. Boulder City was 86. So if you look right in the middle, you're right at 75. So I guess everything kind of points to that midpoint number, and that's how we arrived at it.
I would have one question. In that average that you're talking about, are any of those in a public employees retirement system as our person is, which adds about 28% to our cost?
I know that the Boulder City person would be in that.
Perhaps.
At least the way, unless they've structured it in a very funny way, like they've done some sort of, well, let me say this. If they were not in PERS, I do not believe that they would be in that database, the Transparency Nevada database.
That's possible.
Yeah, I don't think you get one without the other. A couple other comments I wanted to make. There's been a lot of questions about whether this should be a full-time position or a part-time position. And after doing some reading and with the letters that came in regarding the complaints, I did some I did what I always do, and I did some research. And what I found was that in the people that had worked part-time in these positions before, and not only the airport manager, but also the maintenance person, they apparently were assigned to work 30 hours a week, and that was considered part-time. Okay. Now, and then there has been a lot of discussion was that got us out of the PERS requirements and the other benefit requirements. And I want to be clear that the Nevada Public Employees Benefits Program, the one that covers medical and other pieces, anyone that works 80 hours a month is covered under PERS. So unless you're having them work 19 hours a week, then they're going to qualify for the PERS benefits. So 30 hours will not duck the benefit requirement. And it's the same way, it's written a little differently, described a little differently, but it's the same way in PERS. You would have to have that person working, well, it's actually 19 or less from my reading of it. So if we think part-time is 30 hours, we're wrong. I mean, it is, as far as the state's concerned, they'd be working 19 hours. They could not work more than 19 hours a week to avoid those benefit costs. So unless we think that somehow we can operate our airport with 2 people working 19 hours a week, I think we're looking at benefits costs. That being the case, I think we need to consider that sort of like the electricity. It's something we're going to pay. It's the postage, it's all those things, and get on to other considerations. And I just don't think that this is a part-time position. I don't think part of the calculus makes sense here.
The one thing I would like to note here is that included in the attachments for tonight's meeting are 2 letters, one from John Mays and one from David Correo, that address these issues, and I do want to just note for the record that they are in the record. And at that point, I will move on to any questions from the authority members on this issue of Mr. Harris. Mr. Barrett.
No, I just want to thank him for that, and all of you who've worked on this. It's a tough one, but I've been on the bubble regarding whether part-time, full-time, and it's a troublesome situation. But we've been going on the cheap here for a long time, and we have some experience on what the cheap gets us. So that's my only comment. And I would ask, though, I didn't quite understand what you were saying regarding the development part of it. Flesh that out for me, would you?
In our job description, there's clearly responsibility for building up the building around the airport, okay? Using the airport property to increase the tax base and to increase our income. And in the job descriptions that we were matching to, those development responsibilities are not there. So I'm saying, in my mind, I think that additional responsibility is worth something.
I thought that's what you're saying. I just wanted to clarify it for the public or whatever. But yes, thank you.
The other thing I want to say is I brought along the benchmarking information that I got from Larry Harvey. If anybody wants to look at it, it's public or otherwise. I've got it right here. I'm happy to share it with you. So I think Larry did a really good job on the benchmarking. I think we were lucky that he had access to some data that pure mortals don't, and he did quite a bit of good work on it. So I want to acknowledge that despite his absence. So.
The other thing that I would like to mention is that the original subcommittee was made up of Vice Chairman Val, myself, and Larry Harvey. And because Vice Chairman Val has been ill off and on since Thanksgiving, when Member Harris came onto the board, I couldn't get a hold of Brian, and so I moved him onto the board, and I moved myself off of the subcommittee. So at this time, the people who comprise the subcommittee are Larry Harvey, Brian Val, and Mr. Harris. So I just wanted to make that clear. So the question should go to one of those members at this point. Do we have any other questions from members? Member Golden.
Got a couple comments here. Bradley, thanks for your work on this. I think it's a good starting point. We have an old adage when it comes to practicing law, and that adage is, if you want the $40 an hour attorney, you can hire the custodian in the courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
You pay for what you get. And while I appreciate the work that's been set forth here, I think the pay scale is on the low side. The median may not be, but a $60,000 a year manager at this airport isn't going to buy us a whole lot. That's a comment that I will put out there. I know what Lake Tahoe Airport just paid for their airport manager, and it was $120,000 a year plus benefits. Just putting it out there. Experienced guy, knows what he's doing. Doesn't have all the landside development issues. But one of the things he is tasked with that I did not see in this, that we need to put in this without question, is economic development, increasing the business base of the airport. It's one thing to develop the land. It's another to increase the business base of the airport, to attract new business to the airport without consideration of actual hard development on the property. We need someone with some business development experience in here, because there's a lot of untapped potential at this airport, and that's where we're going to see increased revenue. So if we want to hire that $40 an hour counsel, we can grab the custodian in the courthouse. I wouldn't vote for that. And again, I'm not focusing on the numbers, just the concept here. Okay? But we need some focus in here on this job description for business development, attracting new business. There is no reason we cannot do that at this airport. And the airport manager should be tasked with that, and it should be prioritized in the job description. That was the one thing I felt wasn't prioritized. And, you know, my position is, if we want to maintain the status quo, I guess we can go back to having Yvonne Weaver manage the airport part-time on a contractual basis. But I don't want to maintain the status quo here. And we don't need to maintain the status quo. So we should be really doing this right and reaching for maximum potential benefit. So again, I'd like to see a little more priority given to business development experience, economic development experience in the job description. That's all I'm looking for, and the rest were just my comments.
I think that was actually in one of the versions that we did, and I was looking at it as being part of the designs and implements plans for developing landside and airside space. So I was kind of including that in that area just because I knew it had been in one of the previous, but I agree.
Right, and increase airport revenues, that was the,
Yeah, what I'm getting at is we can
Right.
design and optimize land use and increase airport revenues,
but there are other ways.
We have incredible
focus.
potential. Yeah, we have incredible potential to increase business utilization of the airport, and that's what I'm getting at. We need some We need someone with some economic development experience, some business development experience, someone who's going to market and outreach. Good example of this, a couple of examples. We're working with a company right now, and it's just a small deal, if it even comes to fruition. But they're out of the East Coast. They have 30 aircraft. They're looking at opening an office at Carson City Airport. They're going to definitely open one in this region. They do aerial surveillance. That's all they do. They're an aerial surveillance company, okay? I've worked with them, shown them the airport, shown them space available, put a proposal in front of them of what it would cost for occupancy, showed them office space. There's companies like that out there. We have an aeromedical company that uses our south hangar, not the hangar itself, but the office space, to keep an office there, to keep their activities current. There are businesses that are aviation related that need to be reached in the community and pulled in. And that's where I'd like to see some focus from an airport manager, some outreach, business development, economic activity beyond just let's build some more hangars.
Michael, I agree with everything you've said. Can you help us wordsmith? We need it in two places. We need it in two places. After we talk about the airside space development, that sort of thing, we need something in there that just says exactly what you said, increase business activity, etc. And then we need something in the qualifications section that says what you're saying, that business development piece.
Okay. Give me a couple of minutes and I'll...
Can I jump in here now?
Mr. Barrett?
Yes. I agree with what you say about the need for business development and economic development. But in my former incarnation as a reporter for a long period of time, I think that means it's incumbent upon us, whatever the wordsmithing says, to be very good at interviewing the people who come before us, because there are economic developers and there are economic developers. And some of them are just cheerleaders. And I want to be able to cut to the chase when we get to that point and find out who's bringing mostly marketing skills, and I have nothing against marketing skills, and a real feel for how you get these things done. Because there's a lot of talk in the economic development field, but the action sometimes is hard to come by. So we need to be aware. Wordsmithing is important. That's what I did for a living for a long time, but it doesn't get the job done if you interview somebody and he makes a good presentation or she makes a good presentation, but we have to do the background checks. We have to do all the due diligence, so just adding that.
Mr. Harris, have you considered the idea that our manager might work with an outside company to do these items? The economic development and the land development, asset development?
It's something that's been talked about. My gut feeling from talking to a variety of people is that that'd be a way to spend a lot of money really quick.
Yeah.
And, I'm a consultant
And that's an
myself.
understatement.
I'm a consultant myself, and I know about hourly rates and I know about billable hours. So, and when I just start counting on my fingers, I get worried. Therefore, if we have somebody that has got a little polish, can do a presentation, can, run the spreadsheets, and can talk to business people, and they're working a full week for us, I think we're way ahead. And I also think I get the sense from being on this authority that that manager is going to have to focus on this. I think all of us, since I've joined, all of us seem to be talking the same way here. And that we all realize that the airport has to grow.
Member Golden.
I have your request done here. Here's what I'm going to propose. And I don't want to, take the wind out of your sails in any way, shape, or form because you haven't commented yet. Here's my proposition, that I would state that under the job qualifications section, so that's page 2, Linda? Okay. At the end of that, it doesn't have to go anywhere in particular, but consideration given to those with economic and business activities, consideration given to those with economic and business development activities in aviation.
Okay.
Okay? Now, under the essential duties and responsibility, paragraph 4, the end of paragraph 4, optimizes airport utilization by attracting new business, airport tenants, and based aircraft. That is what an airport manager should be doing.
Good.
And I would move to accept this document with revision as stated therein.
I'll second,
there-
but
yeah.
I'll also add the comment.
Hold on,
Public comment?
hold on, we need to take public comment.
My apologies.
Well, that's true. 'Cause
Before we make a motion, I'd like to take public comment on this. Do we have public comment on this item at this time? Mr. Leach?
Good evening. My name is Eric Leach. Mr. Harris, thank you very much for your efforts and your comments on what you've observed of the belief of the authority, the attitude of the authority in your second meeting here at the authority. Thank you. I'm frustrated. None of us want to be here a few days before Christmas. I'd rather be at a Christmas party that I'm missing tonight. If not that, I'd rather be doing some shopping or packing. But you folks are facing the most important decision that you will make in the 4-year term of your office. Without question. The job description that's been prepared begins with a presumption of a full-time manager. It has been mentioned by Chairwoman Law that you have in the record, not read, but presumably all of you have read, at least 2 letters. I believe you have a letter from David Correo that he wrote back in April. Have you all seen that letter? Who's David Correo?
I think this is an opportunity for comment. It's not an opportunity to cross-examine.
Okay, let me do a procedural thing. Let me start with a procedural point. Three times I have made a written request to this authority to be put on the agenda so that I could discuss with the authority the issues of development and administration of the airport, including the manager issue. I believe our chairwoman made a very reasonable decision that rather than fragmenting the agenda, that I would be provided the opportunity. Chairman, would you please explore that a little bit so people know what we're doing here?
That's exactly right. I received an email from him that asked to put those items on there that fell within the scope of what we're discussing tonight and told him that I thought it was broad enough for him to discuss the items that he wants to cover.
Okay, I'd like to clarify that if I may.
Yes.
The items that I asked to be on the agenda are substantially broader than this, which I believe I clarified to you in the most recent email. But I recognize the need to stay here, so I can't talk to you about development other than as it fits within the job description. But also, normally, of course, comments from the peanut gallery are limited to 3 minutes. I hope that with the request that I've submitted, that I'm not stuck with 3 minutes, even though we all want to get out of here and go to Christmas. Okay,
No, you're not going to be limited to 3 minutes, but we will ask for brevity.
I'll try. The reason that I ask you about David Correo, and not meaning to be cross-examining Mr. Dacus, is point of reference. Thank you all for serving as volunteers on this board. Sincerely, I appreciate it. I have some idea what the efforts involved. I served on a board for 6 years that built a hospital. Mr. Rogers, welcome to your first authority meeting. Mr. Harris, welcome to your second. Mr. Golden, welcome to your second. And of course, I know that you have substantial experience at other authorities and airport matters. I'm aware of that and appreciate the experience you bring to us. Mr. Barrett, I think you've been here for a year. Chairman, I think you're just a little over 2. David Correo brought his thoughts to you based on his 4 years on the authority. I believe he was chairperson for 2 of those years, and that was during the period of the maximum development on this airport. And so when someone with that level of experience offers you suggestions, I think that they are well worth considering. I just saw late today a copy of a letter from John Mays. Do you folks know John Mays?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. In my impression, Mr. Mays is a very experienced businessman. I think his suggestions are worth considering. I'm not on their level, folks, okay? I'm just Eric. But I do have a lot of relevant experience, including 20 years at this airport. My request, Chairman, is that you table this matter because there has been virtually no input into this matter from the airport community other than what I've said a couple of times and what you have from those letters. And you may well have more, I don't know. What I would recommend is this. These issues are so important. There is so much more to this than the description of the full-time manager. The entire issue of what development means in this community. We need to get past fuzzy feel-goods. My recommendation is that you table this, and with your authority as chairman, schedule 2 working sessions early in January. Early enough so that we can have working sessions that include the authority members, as many of the 7 are possible, and members from the community, and that we talk widely. I know it has, because they're public meetings, they have to be agendized. Make that agenda very wide so that we can talk about what some of these development ideas are. So that we can talk about different ways we might staff the various tasks that are required to administer this airport. So that we can talk as a group, as a blue sky, to get the very best possibility we can. And the reason I say 2 meetings is this. Based on my experience in business, I've used this technique very effectively. What I try to do is the first time in a project, I try to get everybody together, get the information out, get the ideas out without constraints. All positive, no negatives. You don't criticize an idea. You get the ideas out. And let people think about it for a few days. Then you come back together and you then condense it. If you would take my suggestion, it would take investment of time from the authority and from people in the community. But we then could come to the meeting next January with better thought through alternatives. I'm not going to take your time to go into detailed comments I would have on the job description. I'm hoping that you will accept my suggestion. If you won't, then that's the way it is. But let me just try to illustrate what I'm getting at in a couple of ways. Having talked with people in our community and some on the authority over the years about the airport manager topic. This is not a new topic. We've been talking in this community about the airport manager issue for at least 15 years that I've been involved. I've been in the airport for 20. On the one hand, there are people that feel very strongly that we need a full-time manager so that there's somebody in the office so that when there's a need, when they have to have their gate card fixed, there's somebody there to deal with it. We need a full-time manager, ignoring the fact that if we are operational from 7 in the morning until 7 in the evening, 7 days a week, we're only covering it half-time. But there is a viewpoint that one of the reasons to have a full-time manager is to have someone there. Any of us involved in management know there are other ways to solve that problem. But that's a point of view. There's another point of view that we need to have a full-time manager so that this full-time manager is spending a substantial amount of time on business development. Well, if they're out making presentations, they're not in the office administering gate cards. A solvable problem. Not mentioned is that the implication of the job description is that we're not talking a full-time person. We're talking a full-time manager plus a part-time clerical bookkeeping person. Now, I have come before this authority in the past, early on, and complimented Mr. Harvey on leaving out the clerical and bookkeeping tasks. I think it's far more effective to have a part-time, probably leased employee that does the clerical work, does the bookkeeping work, gets that off the task of the full-time manager or of the manager. But I think that as business people, if we look at this and say, what do we really need? What are the real tasks that a manager needs to do at this airport? There aren't very many. And when we talk about what we're going to do in terms of landside development, we don't have a whole lot of landside to develop that's going to take much effort on the part of a manager. Let me give you 2 points, and then I'll be quiet. One of our candidates for development is the land parcel, or parcels plural, alongside College Park, College Parkway. And I would expand that to say that it could include the parking lot, which is rarely full except on our show day, and the old terminal. Well, unless we're going to hire a real estate developer as an airport manager, it seems to me that a competent airport manager would deal with that development possibility by contacting the leading real estate brokerage firms in town, maybe a couple of the developers, and inviting them to submit a marketing proposal for that property. I bet you most of us could handle that task of contacting those people in about 4 hours. Doesn't require full time. Another candidate for development is the land parcel that the airport owns on the west side of Gonai Road. I understand that there have been discussions over the years of developing that into some sort of a storage facility. whether it be RV storage, boat storage, maybe built up as mini storage. I've never looked at that property other than I'm aware that it's over there. I'm one of the owners of Carson City Airport. I'm a pilot here. I've got airplanes here. My vote is, if I've got an engine problem as I'm taking off from this airport, I don't want to be landing in a storage facility. Now, it's very possible. I have not looked. It is very possible that there's a way to do mixed use over there. There may be room for a clear zone and then some sort of a storage facility on the side of it. It might be something that can be done in a joint use with one of the neighbors. I don't know. Again, we don't need a full-time manager in order to explore those possibilities and interface with the real estate professionals. Now,
I'm going to ask you to
I'm not going to argue pro or con on full-time manager. What I'm asking is, these are illustrations of the kinds of things that need to be talked through before we make the decision that we need a full-time airport manager, real estate developer, and business development manager. I invite you to give us in the community an opportunity to have a meaningful working session to talk these things through. Thank you very much for taking your time to listen to me. And I wish you all truly a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and look forward to working with you in the next year.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Harris.
I would like to ask Member Law and Dirk to give us some insight into the amount of work that you've seen that has to happen at the airport to run things. I see in a letter that was sent to us by David Carreo that, sort of the problem is that in 2008, there was a 30-hour-a-week part-time position that paid $24,000 a year, and those were the good old days. And that is not what I'm hearing from the people that have been operating this airport for the last months. So I would like to hear from you two what your insights are in terms of the work, the amount of work that's involved here, and if you think there's any doubt that that this could be done by let's say a 19-hour-a-week manager, because if they work more than that, then we're into benefits.
I'll take the lead on that. And Mr. Takis, I do want to ask you if we are within the scope of our agenda item at this point, in talking about the responsibilities and the time consumption of the job for the manager, the airport manager.
Absolutely. That's within the scope of the job description, which is what we're noticed. I was a little bit worried at times when Mr. Leitch started talking about developing other pieces of property. However, he did bring it back to say those were examples of the job duties, so that would be within the job description. But certainly, yes.
Okay, I can tell you that when I sat in that office, it took me probably to process the bills and pay bills and start catching up on what was there. I have to say there were no breadcrumbs left when our former manager left. So for anybody walking in from the outside, it took a while to go through the files and figure out where we were and what we were doing and know who our lessees were, who our FBOs were, and so on and so forth. And we've started compiling a desk manual that eliminates that. And there are some of the activities that go on, that have gone on with Dirk and with myself, that will be moved over to a new manager that makes that process a lot easier, okay? We have gone through and found out that there were rents that were not collected over time. No notes in the file as to why they weren't. There are There are billings that never went out. And some of them were not terribly substantial, but some of them were sizable. And Dirk, since we got together and went over those, has sent most of those billings out. We've gained some revenue from it. We were in the midst of an audit when I took over, so there were no previous bills there to even find out where things had been posted. Those are the difficulties that come with not having a smooth transition from one group to another group. So when he came in, I had made a list of about 8 things that I thought we needed to do to go back and check for billings and making sure files were correct and so on and so forth. And when I was gone 2 weeks, and when I came back, his list was almost identical to mine. So we've worked on bringing things current, we've worked on making files complete, we've worked on, right now, I'm working with Brian to get the closeout on AIP 30, which was the north ramp. There are basically no instructions on how to get that work done. So we are facing a different problem than what somebody would do if they came in and there was actually a desk reference manual and criteria set for various functions. But I can tell you that I easily spent 10 hours a week opening the mail and paying the bills and that sort of thing. I probably spent another 10 hours a week making sure that I was relating. I met with various FBO people. I didn't get a chance to meet with Mike, but I met with his secretary briefly one day, and I also met with Weaver, and I met with Sterling, trying to find out logistically where they fit into the picture and all that sort of thing. So there's some interaction with all of your tenants. I met with several of the larger hangar owners, as well as John Mays and Mr. Correo. So not that takes up a tremendous amount of time, but it does, and it does take up some time. I've met with the city on several occasions for various things that we're doing. I had an appointment with Mr. Gian Greco last week that was almost an hour meeting with the lady that was going to handle his special use permit. I've got a meeting tomorrow with the lady that manages the property for the city. Those are still things that the manager needs to handle. As far as the property across west on Gonai, we own a number of acres over there that are impacted by a piece of property that the city owns along Arrowhead. If we want to develop that property and leave a clear zone for airplanes who find themselves in trouble when they leave the airport, then we need to be able to develop that property up to Arrowhead and leave a clear space in the middle. Someone who's doing the job of manager needs to be able to make those connections, spend the time talking to the people to see if there are possibilities out there for us. And I can honestly say that for the month that I worked there, now, true, one morning from 7 to 9 I cleaned the bushes, but that's beside the point. But I mean, I'm not making work to do. I was doing the work that needed to be done. I went to the banks and went down and talked to the people at the storage companies where we have business and so forth. I know that Dirk has spent quite a bit of time talking to Nevada Power about doing off-peak billing and stuff like that to see if it will save us money. He has done a lot of research on replacing the lighting on the south side. I'm losing my voice, sorry. Replacing things rather than spending $1,000 to change the bulbs. Can we change the heads on the lamps in order to put different types of lighting at the top, and whether it's solar or whatever? So there are a number of things that the general public doesn't really see, but just the meetings with NDOT and FAAs, that's a lot of time. And it takes somebody who's familiar with the airport to do those things and do them right.
I'm going to defer a little to Councilor Takis here, but there is no doubt whatsoever this is a full-time position and then some. It shouldn't even be.
Right.
Yeah, it shouldn't even be up for discussion. But there's a very important issue that Steve will remember, and I remember, when the FAA ADO told us that we needed to have a full-time manager at this airport.
Yeah, that question popped up recently, and so I contacted the FAA, and they told us that was not the case. They said, by way of example, there are many airports in Nevada that do not have a full-time manager, that it would not impact our funding, but that to the extent we had projects that required that kind of supervision, we would think about that and make sure we have that covered. He pointed to some airports in Nevada where the public works director also runs the airport, so they don't even have a part-time manager. They have a person who has a full-time job who does this kind of on the side. So that has shifted from what we had heard earlier. I do want to make one other comment, though. I honestly don't know if it should be full-time or part-time. I really don't. I haven't sat in that chair. I haven't done those job duties. And so, I just don't know. I hear the different viewpoints. Everybody's got a good point to make. I think you guys just need to do what you feel is the best thing for this job, and then go forward and see how it works out. I wish I had more insight into the job duties to tell you that. I think it's fairly clear, many people have made this observation, that with our last airport manager, the one who left, that we were paying for a full-time, but we were getting part-time worth of work. I'm sure he sees it differently, but that was a perception by a lot of people here in the airport. But then again, there were also a lot of complaints about things that didn't get done. There certainly wasn't any business development going on. There were a lot of the other things that need to be done weren't getting done. If they had all been done, would it have been a full-time job? I don't know.
So I guess it would be fair, though, to say that the FAA had at one time encouraged us to have full-time management.
Yeah, I think they did, and I think that was about 3 planners ago. I think that was Abel Tapia who felt fairly strongly about that, we're a couple planners down the road, and I have to say, the current planner we have, he is one sharp guy who's been in the ADO for a few years, who I suspect will not be our planner for very long because he's got the skill set that he's going to be going up the ladder. But the discussion I had with him yesterday, I guess it was very frank, because I wanted to know, because you guys wanted to know, is there an FAA requirement? What should we know? And he said, no, there is not. So.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, my concern here is that we are able to maintain our grant funding, which historically we had been strongly encouraged to have full-time management. I will also state that I've read those letters from John and from Ludd, and I know them both well. This is not the airport it was when Ludd was on the airport authority. It's not the same market conditions. Things have changed. And one of the things we all recognize on this airport authority is that we need to optimize utilization of this airport to generate new sources of revenue from beyond just mining rocks and developing what few hangars are going to be developed and collecting existing rent. And it's for that reason that I strongly advocate that we move forward with getting this job description done this evening, putting it out, and seeing what we get back. I don't think maintaining the status quo is a viable option.
Mr. Rogers.
As a newcomer to the board, I don't have any, preconceived notions about whether it's a full-time or a part-time job, but I have a strong feeling that if we staff this position as a part-time job, the chances of us accomplishing business development are greatly reduced. And I have seen near unanimous, everybody's unanimous that we want to accomplish business development. So if we would staff the manager's position as a part-time position, I think there would be unreasonable to expect that we would have that person be doing business development in a part-time job, and then it sort of begs the question, who's going to do the business development? So my instinct, without a lot of experience, is that we ought to hire a full-time manager with the recommended changes to the job description that highlight the need for business development to happen. And then we ought to hold ourselves to a high standard when we see the applicants come in, that we only bring somebody in who we have a high confidence level can accomplish some business development out there and then manage them.
The one thing I would add to that is that I don't think that the job description as written precludes us from hiring a person on contract, does it?
No, I don't believe it would. I don't believe it would. In fact, Larry has worked on a contract, sort of a back pocket thing, should we have somebody that on contract would be a better option for them.
I'll note that on that, I did review the documentation there. Just one note of point of reference. The annual compensation range on the job description does not match Exhibit A on the proposed contract.
And I want to be clear, I'm not proposing that we do anything with the contract at this point. I talked to Larry about this, and he had agreed that really employment contracts are something you negotiate with an employee after you've selected them. It's not something you put in front of them and say, sign this and now you can go to work. He's done some work on it. Should we have somebody that would prefer a contract basis, that could be somebody who's retired from their current slot, and it would be better for them to go into a contract situation because they already have benefits, for example. So it's an option for us, and we may want to have a contract one way or the other in the end, but we're not, until that person's ready to negotiate with us, we really don't have anything to talk about.
The one thing I would comment about that, too, is if you did find somebody who had been working in the state of Nevada in some other capacity, even as a airport manager in some other area, and they wanted to take it on a contract basis, they would have to do so because they couldn't go back into PERS. Just FYI.
So I guess what you're saying is this gives us the flexibility.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to restate my motion that I stated earlier, if that's acceptable to you, Chairwoman.
I would entertain a motion.
Okay. I move that we accept the job description as presented by Authority Member Harris with the revisions of, do I need to restate those revisions, or would you like them in writing?
I think you should submit them in writing to the Secretary.
Okay, with revisions, but I will state them verbally now, that under the job qualifications, sentence be added stating that consideration given to those with economic and business development activities in aviation. And as the last sentence of paragraph 4, essential duties and responsibilities, optimizes airport utilization by attracting new business, airport tenants, and based aircraft. So the motion is to accept the job description as presented with revision as stated.
And then do you want to continue with authorizing staff to post and publish the job opening?
Yes.
Do I have a second to that?
I previously was going to second it. I will second it now and make the point at this juncture that the collective group at this table have varied backgrounds in manufacturing, human resources, government work, and aviation. And the fact that everyone at this table has less than 4 years is partly due to the responsibility that goes back to the deceased Bob Thomas, who insisted that this airport authority have only 4-year terms and that then people had to leave. everyone at this table is capable. I know all of them, with the exception of the man to my direct right. I know him now, but I did not know him before. He came before the Board of Supervisors, and we appointed him. So I think this group is fully capable of making a decision. The question about part-time or full-time makes me wonder how, for example, the San Francisco Giants would do if Bruce Bochy took the off-season off, how our teachers would do if they took summers off, and how our airport manager would do if he worked 19 or even 30 hours a week. So I second the motion.
Any discussion on the motion? Any public comment before we take a vote? Dirk?
I didn't get a chance to say anything there. I hate to dampen people's spirits, but in this entire job description, it doesn't mention what our chairman and what I will repeat, we spent half of our time on. It's not even here. That 20 hours a week that we spend opening mail, doing bills, sending out bills, dealing with all of that, drudgery of the job. It sounds like a real glorious job, but it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of sitting in front of the computer, dealing with bookkeeping and record keeping, and why didn't this guy pay his bill, and on and on and on and on like that. And, what happened on QuickBooks here? This number's not right. Where do I find the answer to this? How do I fix it? I mean, it's just an endless stream of that kind of work that takes a tremendous amount of time. And it's not here. And you better find somewhere to fit that in, or something's going to hit the fan. I'm just telling you.
Dirk, with all due respect, sir, it is stated here, it may not be in verbiage to your liking, but it states, and I didn't write this, I'm just stating the facts, what's here. It says ensures timely and accurate accounting entries and administrative activities. That's pretty clear to me, and again, I'm not the author of this.
Okay, so that little comment is half of this job as it stands. And I bring it up because along with Chairman Law, we've been working together on a lot of this, and I've spent a lot of time trying to find ways to streamline that part of the job, but it's not going to go away. And so I think it deserves, at least in the near future, some consideration as to maybe we can find some ways to outsource some of that work. You can't do it all, because somebody's got to oversee that stuff. Because I found a lot of bills that were being paid for things that we weren't getting. We were paying, just a small example was the water bill that had been paid for over 3 years, and we weren't using any water. And,
on that particular meter, we weren't using any water.
Yeah, exactly. And so, things like that, somebody needs to be watching that. But, so I just wanted to interject that, and it needs a lot of attention.
Any further comment? Mr. Leach?
Purely to reinforce that point and clarify, as I said in my earlier remarks, it's my understanding that the intent of a managerial position that would have a median point of about $75K a year would not include clerical and simple bookkeeping tasks. The 30 hours that you've heard from a former manager, in course, included all of that. That 30 hours, as I understand from meeting with Ms. Weaver a couple of days ago, in that 30 hours, she did managerial tasks, as you're doing. She also did clerical and bookkeeping. She also did maintenance tasks. So hopefully, within the going forward, however you're going to go forward, you're not going to be diluting a manager's time with the sort of thing that can be done for $15 an hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to add a note to that. I had the good fortune of being the first full-time manager when Yvonne quit, and comparing those times to now, which I can do from experience, the level of complexity at the airport is just way, way bigger. It's much, much bigger than what was going on then. Yeah, the bookkeeping was pretty simple back then. It's very complicated now. So just need to make that point.
Thank you, and I'll call the question. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. None heard. We will move on. Item F7 for possible action, discussion and approval of direction to consultant and engineer regarding the FAA AIP 31 master plan. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Actually, this is Steve Takis, Airport Council. I'll address this one. I don't think there's any action for you to take on this tonight. The reason that I asked to put this on the agenda is we've had our first meeting with the consultants that were hired to do the master plan. It's in conjunction with Atkins, and we're using Kaufman and Associates. And we had that first meeting. In the first meeting, some of you were at the first meeting. It was kind of an introduction meeting. There was one exercise where we did a SWOT analysis of strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis. But given that we didn't go prepared for that, it was kind of all stuff off the top of our head. The consultant said that the next meeting would have a great deal of substance to it, and my thought is we should continue to have an item on our agenda in the event they kick a bunch of information out to us and we need direction from the authority, because the direction needs to come from all of you on a vote. And so I guess I'm telling you, there's nothing we need to do with this tonight, but I would like for us to keep this on the agenda so that if something pops up as we go through the master plan, we're in a position to get your input.
Thank you very much.
And I'd also like to add to that, the time frame for these planning advisory committee meetings are approximately every 3 months. We had our first meeting at the beginning of December. The next one is slated for roughly the end of February time frame, and then May and September. And so when that next meeting occurs in the end of February, there will be the planning advisory committee about a 2-hour meeting on all the topics, very, very well informed topics at that point, bases and so forth, and then we'll have probably public input later on that evening as well, and so those will go hand in hand for the next 3 meetings, most likely. And so, like Steve had mentioned, if anything comes to our direction that we need to present to you to have further direction on this master plan, then we will do it at that time. But for the most part, just simple keeping you up to date on what the project will be for the next couple of months.
The other thing that I might add is originally on your plan, you had invited Brian Vowell and myself to sit in on that master plan project. Brian was not going to be present there, so I asked Mr. Harris to sit in on that, and Mr. Rogers happened to be there that day from the public. I do plan on asking Mr. Vowell if he wants to stay on that assignment. If he does not, then I would think that the 3 of us could attend those meetings and pass things along to the rest of the authority members. If Brian does want to stay on it, then we're going to have to limit ourselves one way or the other.
Right. You can't have more than 3, because that would constitute a quorum, and we would need to be noticed. So yeah, and as chairman, I think you can make those reassignments, but I think the polite, proper thing is to ask Brian first. But assuming you can't reach him or something, if I were in your shoes, I would just go ahead and do it. I think you have the authority to do that. And then, as Brian was saying, if the meetings are on 3-month intervals, I would still like to, even though it may not be for a third month from now when we need direction, I would still like to leave this on, because the consultants have asked us for a lot of information, and to the extent they're asking for factual information, Brian and I and other people can simply give them the facts. But if they start asking us for direction as they're building their case to the next meeting, we would prefer the direction come from you, not come from us. Or at least we want you to have the opportunity to give that direction. Nothing further.
Okay, since there's no action on that meeting, is there, we need to move on to the agenda, and I already closed my file. Good job, Linda. I'm not, I'm not enthusiastic about this. Yes, do we have anything to cover, anything further to cover in the engineer's report?
Yes.
Wrong answer.
I should have said.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
Sorry. I appreciate it. Thank you. So in other words, we're still on track to get that out with the increase in scope on that project. Does anybody have any questions as to what was added and what we'll be doing at that point? All right. That was the end of my summary.
Okay. Airport managers.
I hate to start with the bad news, but I better. On Monday morning, when I came in and started working, our computer gave up on us. I had someone out to check it out and see if they could fix it, and the hard drive was going out on it. And so I wasn't able to do anything. We had to just shut it down. I purchased a new computer, and it took me until this afternoon to at least get our programs back on there so that I can start working again. But I don't have any of the data off of the old computer yet. I took it in, and they're trying to recover everything off of it. And I won't know probably until next week if or how much we can salvage. So could be a real problem. I don't know, don't have an answer right now.
And you're going to check with the off-site storage people to see if they have a backup?
I'm going to do that and see what we have backed up there. Hopefully it'll be everything or almost everything. I don't think it's horrible. It'll just take, it's going to take some work getting some of the stuff recovered. But anyhow, moving on to the happier things. Our new Gate 2 was installed, completed last Friday, so that's in place and working. The blower that we finally got assembled, and Gary's been using it, and he's really happy with the way it works. He was telling me that thing it'll blow a tennis ball sized rock 20 or 30 feet. I mean, well, we're not aiming it at anybody, don't worry. He said it doesn't throw the stuff up in the air, it just pushes it along the ground. He's really impressed with it. From what he's done so far, he figures to do all of the taxiways and the runway would take probably a full day's work, but it wouldn't be done all at once anyhow. And he does that along with the same time doing FOD checks. So it's looking like it's going to be a really excellent piece of equipment for us. one thing that's been going on, there's been somebody trespassing on the airport, a homeless individual apparently, and he broke into our blockhouse, the power room for our runway lights and everything, and was camping out in there over a weekend a couple of weeks ago, and Gary put another hasp on there and a padlock to keep him out. And this past weekend, he decided that he was a helper, and he went out and chained up a bunch of the aircraft at Cactus Air Force in such a way that if we got a heavy wind, it probably would have done some serious damage. But fortunately, our security people caught up to him Saturday night and had the sheriffs out. They didn't arrest him, but they know this guy, and told him that, he was on notice to stay off the airport or he would be arrested if he was caught out there again. So whether that'll work or not, hopefully we won't have any more trouble with him. Let's see. Some of the stuff I didn't write down because of my computer issues, but the AWAS situation, I did want to tell you what happened. When they relocated it, apparently the cables that they recovered weren't long enough, and so they pieced them together. And so when he came out to do the service, he put in a full one-piece cable with no connectors in the middle, and that cleaned up the signal a lot. So that should be no longer a problem.
Thank you.
And let's see, I think that's about covers it. Oh, just briefly, Gary also got got us ready for our snow removal times. We got the big truck has been serviced, and the small truck, he got new front tires put on it and put the snow plow back on it, so we're up and ready for snow season. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Legal counsel report?
Yeah, I already told you my perceptions of our new airport planner and how good he was. In fact, I wrote a note to his boss telling him he was really a stellar guy, and I think that's always a good thing to do when you see people. By way of example, he was the one who said to us, wouldn't it make more sense to do all that pavement at one time? You would save money, we would in the long run save money. And of course, we were quick to agree, yeah, that works for us. Whereas usually those meetings, they're trying to push all of your expenses out because they're trying to reserve as much money for all the line of airports they were going to meet with after us. And the guy was really good. The other thing I wanted to report on is we completed the hangar inventory spreadsheet. Linda's got a copy of it. I'm still trying to clean bugs out of it. There's a few data entries that probably need to be cleaned up. But as a result of having cleared that up and having inspected all of the 20 or so hangars that were in Mr. Vaccaro's complaint, we sent a letter back to the FAA saying, look, we've inspected all of those. We now have an inventory of all the aircraft with email addresses for almost everybody. There are a couple airport pilots, believe it or not, that don't use email. But so for some, we only have phone numbers, but for the rest of the world, we have email addresses. And so we have a means to contact them. So that's a good thing. And in the letter to the FAA, we ask them to formally close out the informal complaint that Mr. Vaccaro had filed against us because we found no evidence to support any of his claims of hangars that were being used for other things. Well, all the hangars had an aeronautical use that fit within the FAA's aeronautical use definition. You can do other things in your hangar as long as it has an aeronautical use, which is the FAA standard. So certainly we did find people who had stored other stuff in their hangar, but in all instances, the primary use, the front and center use, was aircraft. And so that's what meets the FAA's hangar use policy, so we were very comfortable telling them, yeah, there's no basis to this complaint. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you. I would add to that, talking about hangar use inspections. I went over and talked to one of the people that Mr. Vaccaro said was in violation, and he indeed had a lot of stuff in his hangar. And he mentioned to me that when Robert Lee was here last spring, he had come over and actually looked at his hangars and had said that he was in compliance. So I took it upon myself to call Mr. Lee, and I said, I've gone over and looked at this hangar. It looks to be in compliance with what is required, and is it true that you went over and inspected this last spring? And he said, yes. And I said, did it have this, 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 and this in it? And he said, yes, it did. And I said, and you're okay with that? And he said, yes. And I said, thank you. So I just wanted to, let everybody know that the people that are there may have other stuff going, but they are in compliance as far as the FAA is concerned, as far as what I saw in those that I looked at. So I just wanted to add that to your report. The other thing is Kurt Hockel at NDOT, who's in charge of Nevada aeronautical applications, gave us a copy of the based aircraft report from 2010. I have gone through it. There are a tremendous number of airplanes that are on that based aircraft report that are no longer with us. They've been deregged or other things. So I'm in the process of figuring out how to get those off the list and get our new inventory on the list. And so that's a work in progress. So that's just to supplement what you had to say there. Any questions, Mr. Takis or myself? Okay. Next is the treasurer's report, and I got a call from Larry yesterday. Day before yesterday, he told me that he wasn't going to be able to be here because of something that came up at work. And unless anybody has questions on on the balance sheet and profit and loss to actual and profit and loss to previous year, I'll accept those as he submitted them. If there are any questions.
I have to say, I didn't see that he submitted one for this month. The last version that I have was last month.
Oh, this says November 30th.
Oh,
And I printed it off my email, so.
Okay, it didn't get to me, and
Okay, all right.
and it didn't get posted, so we probably
probably
should
don't want
not
to
do
discuss
anything with it.
No, I'm not going to do anything with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I will provide it via email, and if you could post it kind of after the fact, that would be great. So we will move past the treasurer's report. Are there any other reports from authority members on the review of projects or anything? Mr. Rogers.
I'd just like to mention that as an onboarding process for myself, I'm going to be going out and talking to the various constituents of the airport with a focus on business development, what the opportunities are out there. And so I just don't want anybody to be surprised when you hear through the grapevine that I'm out, wandering around town talking to a bunch of different folks.
Mr. Barrett.
I'd like to welcome John to the board, and I've known John and Bradley for a number of years, and I guess I got a little testy with some of the testimony tonight because of the implication that we weren't prepared to make this decision. So I hope I didn't offend anybody except the person who apparently won't hear me say this.
Unless he listens to the tape. All right. Are there any items that should be placed on the next agenda that should come up at this time? Or I would suggest that if you do find items that should be included on our next agenda, that you contact Dirk or myself or Steve and ask for those to be placed on the agenda for the next month. And since there's I take that back. Is there any further public comment before we close for the evening? None seen. We are adjourned at 8:45.